We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Dalet Amud Beis Meseches Pesachim. This is Pesachim Daf 34b. Rabbi Yochanan held that if you have Hesach Hadas, when it comes to Kachim, let's say you're not paying attention, so the Psul is just a Psul Tumah. It's not its own independent Psul. It's not a Psul Haguf. It's just a concern. Maybe the item is Tameh, and now he's bringing a proof against Reish Lakish from the following Tosefta. Now, even though on the previous Amud it said V'hatnan, indicating that this was a Mishnah, in reality this is a Tosefta, and it says Kol Shepsulo Begufo Yisaref Miyad. Anything that has a Psul Haguf, it gets burned immediately. And so therefore, in the case that we brought on the previous Amud, when you have a Psul of a Chata Sa'of, if the Psul is a Psul of Hesach Hadas, and if it is a Psul Haguf, as Reish Lakish says, what do you need Ibrat Surah for? Why do you need to leave it overnight to get a Psul of Lina? Just burn it anyways, because it's a Psul Haguf. That's the question against Reish Lakish. And the Tosefta finishes, Bedam Ubebailim, if it's a Psul that has to do with either the blood or the owner, then to Uvar Tzurason, V'yotzin Lebeis HaSreifa. Then in that case, you need Ibrat Surah, and you need to burn it. So in any case, this ends up posing a question against Reish Lakish's position. So Amar Lei, so Reish Lakish said to Rabbi Yochanan, Hai Tana, Tana Devei Rabba Baravuhu. This Tana that said that you require Ibrat Surah in the case of the Chata Sa'of, which is puzzle, it actually is the Tana of Devei Rabba Baravuhu, the Amar who says, Afilu Pigul, Ta'on Ibrat Surah. Even when you have a bona fide psul like Pigul, so in such a situation you might think, okay, just what do you need Ibrat Surah for? No. It says that Tana Devei Rabba Baravua says even a psul like Pigul needs to have Ibrat Surah, and that's why in this case of the Chata Sa'of, it needs Ibrat Surah as well, even if Hesach Hadas is considered to be a psul Haguf. Esvei, he asked another question against Reish Lakish. Nitzma osha nifsal habasar. Let's say the basar becomes tamei or it becomes pasul. Osha yatsa chutz lekloim, or it leaves the curtains of the Beis Hamikdash. Rabbi Eliezer omer yizruk. Rabbi Eliezer says you can still sprinkle the blood. Rabbi Yoshua omer lo yizruk. Rabbi Yoshua says with this kind of a psul, you're not allowed to sprinkle the blood. Umoder Rabbi Yoshua, and Rabbi Yoshua admits Shem Zarak that if you do sprinkle the blood, Horza, it is still effective. So the question over here is, what's the case exactly? My nifsal, what psul is occurring over here? La behesach hadas. Isn't it the same psul that Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish are arguing about? It's a psul of hesach hadas. So iyamri bishlama psulei tumahave. If you say that what is hesach hadas, it's an issue like Rabbi Yochanan says that maybe the item became tamei. Hainu demashkachas lo demeratzi tzitz. That makes sense that the tzitz allows the zrikas hadam to be effective. If you have a situation of just a concern for tumah, the halach is that the tzitz is meratza, and meaning the halach is that even if you end up doing it b'di'evid in tumah, it's still going to be okay. Eliyam psul haguf, but if you say it's its own independent psul, it's a psul haguf. Amai hurtza, why should the sprinkle of the blood be effective according to Rabbi Yoshua? If this is a real psul, why should it be effective? So the Gemara says, no, my nifsal b'tvul yom. The case over here of nifsal actually is a psul of tvul yom. It's not hesach hadas, it's a psul of tvul yom, and that's why in this particular situation it's going to be effective. Rashi over here explains first, my nifsal lav behesach hadas bitmiya the kaven detana nitma v'yatza my psul ikasu. If you already have the psul of tamei and you already have the psul of yotze that it leaves the Beis Hamikdash, what other psul is there? I nifsal ba'avodas dam can go to machshavas chutz lemekomo v'chutz lezmano. If you're going to say it has some machshava psul that you were going to do it outside the proper place or time, lo kari nifsal basar, that's not called nifsal basar. Shayaf adam nifsal, even the blood is puzzled in that case. Uvahal lo neimer Rabbi Eliezer yizruk. Rabbi Eliezer wouldn't say you're allowed to sprinkle the blood in that case. So what are we left with? We're left with hesach hadas. So iyam bishlama psul chshash tumahu. If you say that it's a chshash, just a concern for tumah, mishum hachi mod Rabbi Yoshua shem zarak hortza. That's why Rabbi Yoshua says, okay, b'di'evid, if you do the sprinkling, it's okay. Da'afilu nitma v'adai, even if there was real tumah. V'af agav the tumah psul haguf havim meratza tzitz. The halach is when it comes to tumah, there's a meratza tzitz that tzitz allows the sprinkling to be effective. U'lechatchila lo yizrak. Now lechatchila you shouldn't do it to kasav aritzoy tzitz b'di'evid, because that din of ritzoy tzitz is only b'di'evid. V'yotze af agav de lo mahani le tzitz hortza b'di'evid. Now what about yotze when it leaves the proper area? That also is going to work b'di'evid. The af agav de Rabbi Yoshua boy tarti dam u'basar mi u'hoel v'habasar be'ein u'psul yotze pasal machmas davar davar achiru, since the basar is still around and it's just a different thing that made it puzzle, chashvin le psul chisaron mechitzos, we call it a psul lacking mechitzos, beperkamet benachos besofo, equal lemeimar b'diavad hortza. You can say that's already okay b'diavad. Eloi hesach hadas psul agufu, but if hesach hadas is its own psul, but tzitz nami lo maratzi olah, my hortza, why is the tzitz maratza, why is the sprinkling of the blood effective even on a b'diavad level? It shouldn't be effective. So then the Gemara says, Eliyam Psul Aguf have my hortz of a logar sin Psul Aguf mi kamaratzi tzitz to Psul Yotze nami lo maratzi tzitz kedamin parakamo hainu no seil avon tuma nifsol b'tvul yom. So the Gemara finally answers that the psul is the psul of tvul yom. It became tame because it was touched by a tvul yom. V'taima misham tzitz, and again the tzitz is maratza in such a situation. So the Gemara says, 1 second, if the psul over here is tvul yom, ihachi ainu tame, that's exactly the same as the case of nitma. It said nitma o shenif sal habasar. It became tamei, or the basar became pasul. Now, if the psul of basar is that it touched the tvul yom, that's the same thing as becoming tamei. To that, the Gemara answers tre gavne tamei. There are two kinds of tamei, and since the Bryce is talking about two different kinds of tumah, it's not talking at all about a psul of hesach hadas, so it's no longer a difficulty on Reish Lakish. Gemara continues. Kisolik Ravin, when Ravin went up, Amr l'shmaite kame de Rabbi Yirmi. He said over this whole sugya in front of Rabbi Yirmiyah, v'yamar, and he said, bavloi tipshoi, foolish Babylonians, mishum de yazvi bar de chashocha, since they sit in a land of darkness, amrison shmaitza de mechashchu. They say a sugya, they say a halacha that's dark. What they said doesn't make sense at all. Lo shmiya l'chu ha de Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Did you not hear that which Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said, mishmei de Rav Oshi, in the name of Rav Oshi, as follows? Mei hachag, if you have the water from the chag, shenitmu, that they become tamei, hishikon v'achar kach hikdishan tahoran. If you attach them to pure water and then you sanctify them, they're going to be pure. But hikdishan, if you sanctify it first, v'achar kach hishikon, and then you attach it to the pure water, to meim, they're going to be tamei. So what does this statement exactly mean? Michti, let us see. Zriyoninu. When you're doing this process called hishikon, that is a way of purifying it. It's called zuriya. We'll see Rashi about this. So mali hishikon v'achar kach hikdishan. What difference does it make if you do that process of purification before and then you sanctify? Mali hikdishan v'achar kach hishikon, or if you sanctify first. Who cares? It should purify in either way. Alma, you see from this whole halacha, ein zuriya lehektish, that once something is sanctified, it can no longer be purified. Hachanami ein zuriya letruma. Going back to our original Mishnah, you cannot purify when it comes to truma. And Rashi over here explains. Amra kami de Rabbi Yirmi, he said over this sugya in front of Rabbi Yirmi. Which sugya are we questioning now? Hadar Rav Sheshes le'el. We're going back on what Rav Sheshes said before. Tiasurin milecho mishum hesach hadasu. We suggested that the reason why this truma, these saplings that you replanted, the reason why they're not allowed to be eaten by Kohanim is because there was a hesach hadas. There was moments in time where it wasn't being protected from tumah, and therefore this is a psul, like we said, according to Reish Lakish, this is a psul haguf, and that's why even Kohanim are not allowed to eat from this. So he said that doesn't make sense. Shmaitza de mechashchon kashein yodin time shel davar bodin milibam tam sheino. They're just making up reasons that don't make sense. Asra de mechashcha Bavel amuka. Bavel was a lowland and therefore it was dark. Lo shmiya lechu mikan yicholim lilmo time shel mishnah the asurin milecho misham maila. The real reason of this Mishnah, again, the case was the saplings where you plant them and they become pure again, but still they're not allowed to be eaten. The real reason he's going to say is because it's a special maila that we make by truma. It's like a chumrah. Really, it could be eaten by the kohanim, but there's a special chumrah over here not to eat it. Tiafa gav de mahanya is real chulin. Even though when you plant chulin and that works, that makes it become tar. Avad rabbanan maila de lo tahani letruma lahalos latara gemura laheter achila. The rabbanan said it's not going to be completely pure by truma. We're not going to allow the kohanim to eat it. Umiyo milatame tiharo. But nevertheless, it's not going to be mitame others to lahalo oven maila. They weren't so strict in that regard. So that's what the Mishnah means. When you plant the sapling, it's going to be tar in the sense that it won't be mitame something else. But there was still a maila, as he's going to argue, that kohanim should not eat it. It has nothing to do with hesach hadas. Mehacha kagon shel nisuch hamayim. Let's say you have the water that's used for Nisach HaMayim on Sukkos, the Shabbos Shebesoch HaChag Hayom Malin Osan Me Erev Shabbos. When it came on Shabbos, they would fill up this water from Erev Shabbos. When it became Tameh, they wouldn't be able to fill up on Shabbos. So the only solution was, if you had this water on Shabbos that became Tameh, you had to connect it to the stream of water in the Azara. Umayim Salkalu Hashaka. That's called Hashaka. You connect it to that stream of water. The Zui is Riyas, and it's like planting it, so to speak. What ends up happening is it attaches to this Meha Mikvah, and it becomes attached, and therefore it's batal. It's no longer has this tumah. But that only works if you sanctify it after that process. Meaning Shadayin lo kara and shame or lo kitchu b'chli shares tahorin. You didn't sanctify it by calling it by the name of whatever you're using it for, or you didn't put it into a kli shares. If you didn't do any of that, then it's okay. Then you can purify the water using hashaka. But ein zriel hekdesh. Once you sanctified it, you can't do zriel. A taro bekach. Demala asu bekachim. They made a chumrah when it came to kachim. Hachanami ein zriel. A truma demala asu. So he says over here also, there's no zriya for truma. They made a special chumrah, and that's really the pshat over here, that kohanim are not allowed to have this. To have from the sapling, which even though it was purified, it's no longer technically truma tameya. There was a special chumrah that it's not going to be considered pure, in the sense that we're not going to allow the kohanim to eat from it. So the Gemara now says, Yosef Ravdimi v'kamar lo lahashmait. Ravdimi sat and he said over this sugya. Amar le Abaya. So Abaya said to him, Hikdishon b'chli kamar. This halach of sanctifying, that no longer that we have a chumrah in that case, you can't purify. That's if you sanctified in a kli. But maybe if you just sanctified it by pronouncing it kadosh, we wouldn't be so strict. Oh, deal more maybe. Maybe the Rabbanan said we have to be strict, even if it was just sanctified verbally. So that was the question that Abaya asked. Amar le, so he said to him, Zulo shamati. I didn't hear the answer to your question. However, kayotze bo shamati. I heard something similar. To Amar Rabbi Yavo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yavo said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Anovim shenitmu. Let's say you have grapes that become tamei. Darchan, you're allowed to step on them. You're allowed to crush them up. V'achar kach hikdishon, and then if you sanctify it after you crush it up, tahorim. Then in that situation, it's going to be pure. However, hikdishon, if it was sanctified first, v'achar kach darchan, and then you crush it, then you make it smaller, and you bring out the grape juice tamei, and then in that situation, it's going to be tamei. So he argues as follows: V'anovim diktushas peninu. What are we talking about over here with the grapes? We're talking about sanctification verbally. We're not talking about putting it into a klisharis. But va'afilu hachin, nevertheless, avad rabbanan ma'ila. Apparently, we're saying that if it's sanctified, it's too late, and you're no longer allowed to make it pure. And Rashi over here explains, Zu lo shamati b'mayla zu d'zuriya lo shamati in b'peh and b'kli. When it came to your question by zuriya, I don't know if it applies verbally or not. Aval b'mayla achera shamati da'af b'ktushas peh avdu rabbanan. But I did hear in another situation that the rabbanan were strict even by ktushas peh. V'ikol amein l'fminadu adin l'chol mayla shebekodesh. We can assume that's true everywhere. Case over here is as follows: Darchan v'achar kach hikdishan tohoros. Meaning, linisachim. What you're doing is here, you're crushing these grapes to make wine for Nisach Hayayin. You're going to use it in the Beis HaMikdash. Rabbi Yochanan l'taimi damer leil mashkin mifkad pekidi. Now the assumption over here is like Rabbi Yochanan said before, that the juice is not part of the grape. It's not absorbed in the grape. So just because the grape is tamei, that doesn't mean the juice is automatically tamei. V'lo kabili tumah mochel. So the juice in there is not going to be makabel tumah. L'kamei mefarish hechidarachlu. They're going to ask later how exactly you're stepping on it. Hikdishan v'achar kach dorchan tameya. So again, it said if it's sanctified first, it's a problem. You made it sanctified for nisachim. Tameos, David Rabbanan Maila Bekachim. We say that there's again a chumrah when it comes to kachim. The metame mashka imha ochel. We say that the liquid becomes tummy together with the food. V'lo amrinim behu mashka mifkad pekidi. We don't apply the leniency that the liquid is just contained within the grape. V'ho'anovim kedushas pehin. And the Gemara asks, when it comes to grapes, this is just sanctified verbally. Dinami nisanan lekli ein kli mekachin. Then kli sharis mekachin. Eladavar haroylo. Kli shar is not even mekadosh in this situation. Kidei alfinim v'shchitas kachim gavim mizbeach shenemar kol hanogeh v'mizbeach yikdash shomani ben roy ben sheino roy tamalomar Oloch lisharis dumya de mizbeach nafkol and hasam. It's learned out over there in shchitas kachim. So in any case, the point is, it's not going to be sanctified in a kli in this situation. And you see, we are strict when it comes to anavim, that if it's sanctified first, then we do not apply this halacha that you can trample it and you can squeeze out the juice and it's pure. Apparently, we apply a chumrah that it's considered, the liquid's considered absorbed in the grape, and we say that it's tameh. So the Gemara says not a proof. Amar Rav Yosef says, Anovim Klam, and you're trying to bring a proof from this situation of the grapes. Hacha ba'anovim shel truma askin. And the case over here actually is anovim of truma. And in that situation, the kedushas pedidhu kedushas kli damya. When you sanctify verbally when it comes to truma, that's the same as putting it in a kli when it comes to kachim in the Beis Hamikdash. Avalhani deboy kli. But if you have a situation where in general you require a kli, bepeh lo aver rabbanan maila. If you would do it verbally, we actually wouldn't be so strict. It's only in this particular situation where we're talking about anovim shel truma. Rashi over here explains, "Ba'anovim shel truma v'hayik dishon kedushas truma kamar." Case here is that you just say it's truma. Devit truma lo shayich kedushas kli lo b'yayin v'lo ba'anovim. There is no kedushas kli by truma at all. Avalhani mei hachag. But when it comes to a situation of, again, mei hachag, of this water that's used on sukkos, you can't compare that bichlal to the case of anovim shel truma. So therefore, you have no real raya from truma to our case. So the Gemara says, 1 second. Darchan va'afilu tuva. It says over here that you have these grapes and you can trample them and squeeze out the juice, and it's not going to be tamei in this particular situation. You're allowed to do as much as you want. To me, Amar Rabbi Yochanan hachi. Did Rabbi Yochanan say you could trample grapes no matter what size they are, squeeze out the juice? Again, in a situation where you don't have the chumrah because it's sanctified, and we're going to say the juice is not going to be tamei. V'Amar Rabbi Yochanan, didn't Rabbi Yochanan say before, anavim shenitmu, when you have anavim that become tamei, darchan pachos mikabetza, that you have to at least crush them less than a kibetza, only then you can squeeze out the juice, because then it's not going to convey tumah. Something smaller than a kibetza is not going to convey tumah. Over here, there's no mention of a kibetza. It seems like you're not going to convey tumah in any situation. So the Gemara answers, you could answer that in this case as well, we really mean to say that you crush it smaller than the size of an egg. Or you could answer a different answer. Hasam denaguluhu barishon. Over there, the situation was it touched a rishon dehavilu inu sheni. So the grapes were a sheni, and the sheni could, in theory, create a shlishi. So in order to avoid that, you need to make it less than a kibetza. Hacha denagu. But in this case here, it touched b'sheni. The grapes touched a sheni dehavilu shlishi. So they become a shlishi. And if the grapes are a shlishi, there's no revi by truma. So you don't have any concern. You don't have to worry at all about the juice becoming tamei, even if it's larger than a kibetza. Amar Rava says, Afanon nami tanina. We have a Mishnah that says the exact same thing. V'nasan olav mayim chayim el keli. It says in the pasuk you have to put mayim chayim into the vessel. Shetehei chiyusan bekli. That implies that it needs to be going straight into the kli, this mayim chayim. V'nasan, but then it also says v'nasan al matalushin ninu. It seems to be that no, it doesn't go direct, it's been detached. V'hamechubarin ninu, isn't it attached? What's going on over here? Rashi over here explains, we have a Mishnah that says that we're machmir when it comes to kachim va'afila b'kedushas peh, even in a situation where it was only sanctified verbally. Shetehei chiyusan b'kli, but also kli atzmo shu mekadesh bo mechatos. We're talking over here about the mechatos, which are used to purify someone who becomes tamei meis. So in that very kli where you're being mekadesh, where you're sanctifying the mechatos, biafron with the afer, tzarech lemaloso min hamayin. You have to directly fill up from the spring, that the water should go straight into that kli. Don't use a different kli as a go-between. Fill up the water from the spring in a different kli and then pour it into this kli where you're creating and you're sanctifying the mechatos. The chasa v'nasan. Now that's what it says, but it also says in the pasuk v'nasan to mashma telushin. That's mashma that you are allowed to uproot it from the spring. To muter lemalosa b'kli acher v'yerim l'sochze. Apparently, you are allowed to put it in a different kli as a go-between and pour it into. So that's the problem over here. Again, the Mishnah says v'nasan alav ma'im chayim el keli shetei chiyusan b'kli. Sounds like it has to be direct, but v'nasan. But the pasuk says v'nasan, which means it doesn't have to be direct. Amat telushin ninu v'amechubarin ninu. What are you talking about? Is it talish? Is it mechubar? And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph.